Hello, everybody. Adam Parks here with another episode of Receivables Roundtable. Today, I'm here with my new friend, Mr. Scott Renner with Velo Law. How you doing today, Scott?
Very good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I've been looking forward to this conversation for some time because I think that you're very interesting living at the intersection of collections or creditors' rights law and technology. And as I've gotten to know you and your organization over the past couple of months, it's really been interesting to see how you approach that specific intersection and the different things that you've been able to do to build your firm with a technology first kind of footprint and mind frame. So for anybody who hasn't been as lucky as me to get to know you, could you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm an attorney. I'm licensed in a few different states, in Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and Montana. But primarily, I followed the path that so many lawyers do. You didn't know what you wanted to necessarily do. So my father's an attorney, and that kind of what always kind of led me down that line. My father, and where I'm from, is a smaller community where most attorneys are general practice. So everyone's doing a little bit of divorce, everybody's doing a little bit of criminal. But oddly, my father had this little portion of his practice, not huge and just very centralized to the city and county that we lived in, that was collections. And most of this was pre-internet. So collections, completely different world once the internet came in.
Mhm.
And as I started getting old enough to understand what it was that this portion of his practice was, I started finding an interest in it, namely just because it being more of a business than just strictly the law.
Mhm.
So as time progressed, I went to college. Always kind of had the idea that I wanted to become an attorney, and then while I was in college, got a job as a collections clerk at a local credit union. And during that time, I had to deal with a number of different collection attorneys. And oddly, a little cocky in a way, but kind of said, I know I can do it better than they can. And it wasn't so much about the part about collecting more money or the part
Mhm.
about being this amazing litigator. It was actually just this core communication piece that just seemed so simple. You reach out, you say, hey, can you let me know XYZ? And in a reasonable amount of time, somebody gets back with you and they say ABC. So again, that kind of led me to this interest. And through that little bit of business background, I made the decision that I was going to go to law school. And again, when I went to law school, it wasn't to be a litigator. It wasn't to be a public defender or a tort attorney. I went to law school to do exactly what I'm doing, which is to be a collections attorney. Oddly, I've yet to ever come across somebody that went to law school specifically for that purpose. Um, I think most people just kind of land in it somewhere. So from day one, I always had this idea of what I thought it could be, whether that was simply from a client perspective, a growth perspective, a business perspective, or in most cases, really this kind of technological perspective that I felt that most attorneys that were so purely focused on the historical piece that is a lawyer that they keep overlooking everything else. And throughout my life, I was lucky enough to have enough of kind of the tech influence around me. I can remember the very first time I learned any type of code. I was in third grade. My older brother was in sixth grade, and I wanted to make a website, which was
Okay.
very, very new at that time. Even then, the internet, I mean, it was dial up. We were the only person in our block, actually, I think my school, that had the internet at this point. And
Okay.
so through that, he said, "Oh yeah, we learned in class that you make this little half triangle thing, and you type in IMG space SRC equals quotation, and then an image you like on the internet, and you right click it, and you go to properties, and it gives you this addressy thing, and you paste it there, and then you do this quotation thing, this little half, the other side of the half triangle thing, and you put that in this form on tripod,
Mhm.
and it puts an image on your site." And it was really just from there that just kind of piece by piece by piece, without actually taking in-depth programming and that type of background, that just kind of led to this ongoing interest and long, basically throughout my life so far, this development of technology that just kind of built with it. So as I was finishing law school up, I was lucky enough that I was able to get a number of internships in three different collections law firms.
Mhm.
Oddly, it probably was because it was the first time in their life they ever had somebody come and apply and say, "Hey, I want to do this," versus just you want to do this, and I'm like, yeah. What else would you do? Why else would you go to law school?
Mhm.
And so got some really good experiences. I was lucky enough to see a collections firm running incredibly well, and but more importantly, actually two law firms that ran very poorly. That there
Mhm.
was something within it that had caused it to be on a downward trend. So I always say you learn more from other people's failures than you do their successes, because success is very personalized, but most failures are actually a development. It's a piece. If you find a way and you look back on a lot of businesses that fail, that isn't just because of a specific person's individualized capacity. You'll
Mhm.
kind of find certain things, and within this was actually their necessity of organization within their companies. And again, from that, as I kind of made my stream and so forth with graduation and passing the bar, and made that determination of where do I want to go. Graduated at a very trying time in 2009 and into 2010. It was kind of that last real downward dip of that period's recession.
Mhm.
Lawyers were a dime a dozen, and I kind of said, you know what? If you're gonna go bankrupt, now's the time to do it. So I was like, where do I want to live? I want to live in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Luckily, debt collections is such a wide space. You could be in Detroit, you could be in Grand Rapids, you could be
Mhm.
up in the Keweenaw Peninsula in the basement of a utility farm, and you can actually still do collections. Probably not the most interesting place to do it, but I always loved Grand Rapids, so that led me to really just to pack up, move over. The proverbial put out your shingle,
Mhm.
and I was lucky enough that um, I actually answered the phone when it was actually a collection agency that needed an attorney and had the wrong number that happened to be my number. And they're calling up like, well, we're actually calling. You're not. Where's this? I'm like, oh no, absolutely, it'd be my pleasure. But as I hung up the phone, I said to them, I was like, well, if you ever have a need for a collections attorney in the west side of the state, Grand Rapids, Michigan, uh, I'd love to be able to assist you. It's just a random collector. No, no problem. He actually told somebody. And about 3 weeks later, I got a phone call and went over to the other side of the state and sat down and talked. And at that point, I had to reach out to my dad and say, "Hey, Dad, I'm fresh out of law school. I need an old attorney to sit next to me so I don't look so young." Because again, young attorneys, there's just
Yeah.
this persona that they don't have any idea what they're doing. And he came over with me, and it became a joke between my dad and I the first year or so, which was when I had these new client meetings, was, "Hey, Dad, I need you to come." And he was living 100 miles away from me. It's like, "Hey, I need you to come to this client meeting." He's like, "What do you need me to do?" I was like, "The normal." He goes, "Okay, sit there, be quiet, and look old." Perfect. And lucky enough within that, in collections is such a tight knit community that word of mouth kind of happens and spreads, and was able to kind of actually make that commitment career wise to collections.
That is a fantastic story, all the way back to the HTML coding. That's where I learned as well. In 200 websites later, I knew exactly what was going to pop up when you described the code verbally, which is pretty funny to me because it's a unique skill set that you don't see as often anymore. I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily, as they're growing their technology knowledge, don't go all the way back to the basics in the beginning, right? Everybody's worried about the fancy bells and whistles that you can stack on top of it. But at the end of that great story, now you're here running Velo Law. Tell us about Velo Law and what it is that makes you guys so special.
I'd like it to believe that what has been the most contributing factor to our success, in the sense of an internal base, has really stemmed from two different pieces. One is an overwhelming commitment to organization,
Mhm.
not the organization, which of course is there, but actually being organized. And the second is the willingness to invest and commit and learn uh, different areas and different types of technology that can actually be integrated into what it is.
Mhm.
Um, and I think what's significant about that is where you see in a lot of businesses and so forth that technology is such a delegation item.
Mhm.
You'll have the CEO delegate it to the vice president, who delegates it to this, who delegates it to this, and then it goes down. And then ultimately, you get to a person that has to implement a certain level of technology that doesn't understand the processes of which the technology are going to be handling to. We have IT people in our office, they are fantastic. But when it comes down to, do they truly understand the integral steps of filing a lawsuit, collecting an account, locating? They don't. They only know what in that task somebody teaches them. So we've been
Mhm.
able to have tremendous success on the technology side, not just in investing into technology, but actually utilizing that technology in such a way that is both helpful for us and of course, more importantly, our clients, because we are actually a top-down approach to that type of interaction, that type of investment. So, as I talked about earlier, you're dealing with web code, and it's not just a place where you have somebody come up and they set up the software.
Mhm.
It is, no, teach me what the software is, teach me how to set it up, and then we will set it up. Sometimes, of course, there's a little bit more hiccups here and there right at the beginning, but once it gets going, that ability to just continue to reinvest into the individual technology that's in front of you is just astonishing. And it can be as simple as a web form, as a website, into the actual collection software that we utilize.
Mhm.
And then from the organization standpoint, being organized is in our office is all the way down to every document gets stapled the exact same way in the exact same spot. Compliments of my fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Gleason, who talked about her internship at GM back in 19 whatever, and that's how you staple them. And we kind of went with it. Again, that consistency piece to it, all the way down to the fact that from day one, the level of written procedures for every single step
Mhm.
of every single process has a reference procedure on our internal website. And
Mm.
we have, and from day one, invested into having people that's pure job is to maintain that. And every time a process changes, every time there's that reference, people in our office always can go look at it and know exactly what are the minimum basic steps that have to be accomplished. And now to this point, it's thousands and thousands of them that have allowed people to advance faster than they would have if it was only just one small little facet at a time. So really through that piece, we've been able to find this really nice collaboration between organization and technology that has allowed us to, I'd like to say, be very good at what we do, which is taking an account, figuring out how to get paid, and executing in a reasonable time, in an organized time, and more recently and more importantly, in a compliant way that isn't
Mhm.
going to turn around and end up getting your client either sued or bad, either at the least just bad PR that they have to deal with when they go back to their hospital, their bank, their credit union, and so forth.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, right? But one of the things that I'm kind of picking up, one of the themes that I'm picking up here is that you've got such detailed level of policy and procedure as to how you want things done. And then you're driving that technology transformation or even building that organization from the ground up with that top down kind of technology mind frame, which is very interesting. What does that intersection look like when you've got kind of your people that are managing those policies and procedures, and then you've got this technology coming together? I mean, it seems like you found like this perfect mixture, right, between those two worlds of having it documented and showing them the steps, but it also enables you to implement new pieces of technology to solve for existing problems or create those efficiencies and then almost immediately view those. But what's that intersection look like between those two worlds?
It's interesting because a lot of people coming in find it difficult,
Mhm.
find it a little bit more daunting at the beginning because you're having to train so much of the process, the more of that this, or unfortunately at the beginning it almost seems more like an assembly line. We always say to new people who are starting that the individual tasks that you're going to do, they are going to be the same task 95% of the time,
Mhm.
but that 5% is going to take up 50% of your time.
Mhm.
So it's more of a oh, okay, 10 minutes, one task. And again, it's really more about the ability to kind of motivate the employees through that time period and showing them, someone who's been here longer and how that piece is. But it's really just more of that commitment that we made to it. One thing that we were really fortunate to do is when our office started, and when I started practicing law,
Mhm.
which this is really all I've known other than internships, uh, it was started to be a collections law firm.
Mhm.
So at the beginning, where there were very few accounts, instead of fighting parking tickets and spending a bunch of time over there or hiring staff, I I did each facet and it would spend my day writing procedures,
Mhm.
taking the accounts along. So what we've been able to do is as we grew and as we had more people get involved, we were able to have each person just build upon what was already there. They
Mhm.
have, even the way our procedures are written, are very consistent. The same type of headings, the same types of fonts, the sizing, the spacing, all the way down to our internal website is exactly 600 pixels wide in the core content, so that you can split it on a widescreen computer screen and you can have two procedures or two pieces open at the same time, you know. And within that piece, we've actually been able to build this process that allowed this intersection between the way technology is being utilized and trying to have people within our organization consistently learn the technology. It's
Mhm.
fantastic, and it's such an awesome thing to be able to say. When you want to file a lawsuit, you go into an account, you hit one document, you say you do put on list, and it's going through and it's evaluating the type of accounts, picking from 27 different complaints. Each complaint has 200 different variables based on one consumer, two consumers, based on the amount of the debt, picking different filing fees, setting the venue based on township versus zip code. Just this onslaught of, really, I think the equation is almost 1,000 different conditions and just putting it on a print list. That's
Mhm.
easy. It makes it fantastic for people when they start an organization.
Mhm.
But that's actually one of the hardest pieces that you have, is when you have to go to your staff and say, yeah, see how simple this is, but I need you to understand how the technology works. It's
Mhm.
easy to have technology do something. It's useless if the people around it don't understand what's happening, because technology can only be so accurate, and having to
Mhm.
ensure that you have just the right enough of human touch to keep an eye on it is really where that value goes. You know, jokingly within the organization, it's always, if we didn't need you to think, we wouldn't need you here. Your thought process is what separates you from a computer.
Yeah.
AI does an amazing job until it's something that hasn't been written down before.
Mhm.
And it's amazing how after 13 years and hundreds of thousands of lawsuits later, every single day we find something new that the technology could never think about and that the procedures have never seen before, and keeping the entire organization committed to keeping both facets working together, because without the other, it's just an amazing thing. It's not an amazing organization.
It's such an interesting approach to the challenge, right? Of kind of understanding those policies and procedures and applying that technology. I had a teacher in high school that was teaching accounting, and I remember somebody in the class saying to them, "Oh, well, we're all just going to use QuickBooks. By the time we graduate, like that's just going to be what it is. We're all going to use QuickBooks." And I remember Mr. Bevilacqua looking at us and saying, yeah, no. If you don't like, do you want to know how to use software? Do you want to know how to do accounting? Because I'm here to teach accounting. And it's been such a true statement, because the only reason that I'm able to unravel or solve financial problems within a bookkeeping system is because of my understanding of the credits and debits and how all of those things function together, versus just knowing how to, function a
Yeah,
specific item in QuickBooks.
how to
Um,
hit
you know,
process.
if how much harder does it become to find, team members, right? How much harder is it to find staff when you've got such a technology forward type organization? Or do you find it easier to kind of new people coming in embrace this environment?
It's a really interesting piece, and I think the last 3 years during kind of the COVID society that we are just hopefully now starting to see, most places in our country kind of starting to stem away from,
Mhm.
uh, is is a very significant piece. Collections as a whole is already not the sexiest employment to have. you
Sure.
know, uh, because we're a law firm as well as the collection agency, that does help us a
Mhm.
good chunk when it comes to retention. Because if you have somebody that's getting into an industry for the very first time and you hear collections, like I'm a debt collector, they're a little bit off. I mean, me personally, it's different. When people ask me what I do for a living, I say I'm a debt collector. It's
Mhm.
only later in the conversation that they find out that I'm a lawyer. And only even further in that conversation, they realize that I own a collections law firm. But when it kind of comes to the recruitment and retention and having people actually find that excitement, the law firm part really does help for the collector side. Um, when it comes to having people and refining the right people, it is a very specific set of skills. And oddly, a formula that isn't not 13 years in is not something. It's amazing how often you find someone that you think is a long shot and they end up just being amazing, and they're here 5 years later, and you look
Mhm.
back and say, really?
Yeah.
I mean, after I said fine, hire him, I looked at it again and I said, why did I agree to that? And on the other end, you find that absolutely perfect, driven, the background, the experience, and then they get in and they can't handle the freedom that you
Mhm.
have. And by freedom, I mean the fact that you don't have an attorney breathing down your neck. In our legal support staff, we always say we have no secretaries in our office, and our attorneys are never going to come to you and ask you to dictate something. If they can't type it faster than you can dictate it, or faster than you're able to dictate it, this is not the right organization from them. So for us, when dealing with people, it's really been more about trying to ensure that we have that straightforward conversation with them, not just during the interview process, but actually during their first week of the onboarding process, where we show them how all these amazing things can be in place, how absolutely confused they're going to be, but
Mhm.
that communication, and that there's two ways of training you. There's training you so that you can become useful quickly, or there's training you so that you can be useful long term. And that we're always going to invest into the long term. We're not going to look during the first 3 weeks and say, what can we do to get this person doing something that isn't going to lose money?
Mhm.
Ours is, no, what can we continue to do that's going to make them bring value to themselves and to our organization, not in the first month or the first 2 months, but in the year, 2, 3, 4, 5, and hopefully indefinitely, as they find how amazing this industry is once you get over what television says that
Mhm.
it is.
Well, as you've gone through the process of building this organization and deploying technology into the legal environment, is there one big lesson that you've learned that you would share with the industry, either one big pitfall or something that you've avoided during that process that has helped you to kind of skyrocket to success?
I think the biggest piece, or the biggest thing that someone has to do or accept to be successful in the arm industry, but specifically the more centralized collection part, is I always look at it as Agent Orange during Vietnam, spray and pray.
Okay.
And I'll say it kind of lightly in certain circumstances, but it takes a very long time to build up anything in collections.
Hmm.
It takes 18 months of getting a new client. It takes 18 months from when you start. Even when it comes to learning, it takes 18 months before you start seeing the benefits of that.
Hmm.
But if you stop investing into it, it only takes 3 months to destroy. And you think that there would be more consistency to it. Well, if it's 18 months, you'd have 12 months to destroy it. But
Hmm.
it's so hard to overcome it because the timelines are so much longer than you would think. Especially when you invest into the legal side of it, where you're looking at all these filing fees, all the
Hmm.
investment, getting to judgment, getting to that, getting to filing a garnishment, and that's even ignoring finding out where they work.
Hmm.
So the biggest piece I say to people, and the few friends that I've had around the country that have started getting into this area of the law, or more into this industry, has been, you cannot fear your investment. You cannot fear that if you invest into something that it may not pay off. Tons of them are not going to pay off.
Hmm.
But if you keep reinvesting, you will come out ahead. If
Hmm.
you keep investing in staff, you keep investing into technology to, I mean, even all the way down to what chairs people have, and to your website, and to whatever in the world it is,
Hmm.
as long as you keep investing into it, overall you will come out ahead. You just can never allow the fear of falling behind, the fear of failure, the fear that not enough is coming in, stop you from investing into your accounts. And I think the majority of times when you see a client pull out of a collections law firm, more importantly, if you can generally stem it back to that firm's unwillingness to invest into something,
Hmm.
invest into enough staff, invest into more lawsuits, invest into more skip tracing resources, whether it's internal or third parties, sometimes even compliance. But if you make that absolute commitment and you don't lighten up on it, it's very difficult not to succeed. It's just sticking with it.
I think that's great advice, not just for those in the collections industry, but those that are starting a business or just in life in general, right? Like you can't be afraid of those investments and you can't be afraid of forward progress. Wow, Scott, this has been a lot of fun and I really appreciate you coming on and having a chat with me today.
No, absolutely. My pleasure.
For those of you that are watching, if you have additional questions you'd like to ask Scott or myself, you can leave them on LinkedIn or YouTube. We'll be happy to respond to those just as quickly as we can. Or if you have additional topics that you'd like to see us cover, you can leave those in the comments below as well. And hopefully, I can get Scott to come back and help me continue to great content for a great industry. But until next time, Scott, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you as well.
Absolutely. And for all of you that are watching, we'll talk to you again soon. Have a great day, everybody.